I want to talk about annotating in order to identify implicit claims. What do I mean by implicit claims? What is the difference between an implicit claim and an explicit claim? Okay. Explicit means that, Ezekiel, did you raise your hand?
I did, but I think that explicit is more like you can see it easier, when implicit's a little bit harder to see.
Yes, explicit is stated straight out. Like when, um, I'll come back to that later. I'm looking at my text and it has so many scribbles all over it that I can't find an explicit claim. Um, but an implicit claim is one that's embedded in the text. For example, when we talked about Koenig last week, we saw that Koenig was making claims about the water even before he made his argument about the water. And so we could see that he was building on that to make it more important. There is something that Kristof focuses on in this text, and he'll repeat undocumented a lot. He has lots of details about undocumented immigrants. Francis is undocumented. The undocumented community in Oregon is not getting federal money. And elsewhere, he talks about that, the first generation immigrants. And he uses the word immigrant a lot. And so he is making some implicit claims about Latinx immigrants, documented and undocumented. Why do you think he would want to make so many claims about Hispanic immigrants? Anybody?
I think he just wants to show that, like, not all immigrants are bad, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Esteban. A lot of people in the United States think that immigrants are bad, that immigrants are stealing jobs, that immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, are stealing from the government, taking payouts. And a lot of people are thinking these things, and Kristof doesn't straight out say you're wrong. Instead, he makes implicit claims that they're wrong. He gives example after example in order to prove this point very subtly, to plant pictures in his readers' heads so that they can see that this thing that maybe they've been thinking is incorrect. And we'll look at that, how we find those things through annotating. And then I want to talk about creating summaries which focus on what an author is doing instead of just what an author is saying. So before we move on, I think that it's important to pay attention to details. Did I? Yeah, I missed that thing. I took out a slide, and I don't know why I took the slide out, but I did. I saw a lot of you were spelling Kristof's name in a variety of ways. And whenever you come across a name that you're not familiar with, and we do that all the time, there's so many names in the world. But if we're going to write about them, it's important to check and double check to make sure that the author's name is spelled correctly, because it shows that you know, like, you are paying attention to details, and it makes you seem more credible. So the thing that I wanted to stress is how it's important to pay attention to details when we read. Why? Because we might focus on some ideas more than others because of our experiences or because of emotional triggers or just because we're in a hurry. And so we might see a claim, for example, in Koenig's text last week, we could see that Koenig wasn't familiar with his heritage, that he'd never learned about the Ho-Chunk Nation when he was in school. His mother hadn't shared a lot with him. He was more focused on playing basketball, and that's kind of how he fit in his community in the city. And if we focus on that, because that is something that we've experienced or we think that that is culturally interesting, we might miss that he's very much making an argument that the government should not interfere with the water supply, that it should care for the land, that it should honor its agreements with Native Americans. And so we might miss that very important main idea that Koenig is making. The other thing, the reason why it's important to pay attention to those details is when we respond to a text, we want to make sure that we don't misrepresent an author's ideas, what an author is saying. And so let's take a look at Now is a Time to Learn from Hispanic Americans. Do you all see this on the screen?
Yes.
Yes? Thank you, Taylor. I'm using Diigo, and I created a slide. I created a slide in the second week of class about the importance of annotating. Now, I like to annotate on paper. That is actually my preference, and so I printed out a copy of this text so I could write all over it and circle words and number things, because, you know, like I circled Hispanic on my paper because he singles out that community and doesn't really talk about other communities that might also offer a model for civil society. I underlined now. I also, when he said researchers have been puzzled for decades about why there's a Hispanic paradox, I numbered. You know, like he had strong families, social networks, religious faith, and active churches, a hard-driving immigrant work ethic, and then I went through and I found all those references in the text just so I could pay attention to them. I read so many things, and I imagine you do too, that it can be hard to catch all the details. So with Diigo, I can highlight and then I can create notes. So here are my notes on this. What is a paradox? What's going on right now? Why is he focused on this group and not another group that has these same values? Because I want to remember these questions. As I'm reading, I'm asking questions. And that's how I read. That's how I pay attention, is I don't just read from beginning to end when I'm reading for a class, or whether I'm teaching a class or taking a class, I take notes. It's sort of talking back to a text. It keeps my brain actively engaged so I don't misunderstand things. What is a paradox? Anybody?
Some sort of statement that sounds like it should counter itself.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It is a statement that seems impossible. It's contrary to expectations. It counters itself. So if we know that a demographic in the United States, for example, Latinx people have a lot of poverty and a lot of discrimination, we would think those things would make a shorter life expectancy. And so he says the opposite is true. There is poverty, there is discrimination, but Hispanic Americans live significantly longer than white or Black Americans. And that is a claim that he's making. So that is the paradox, that Hispanic Americans live longer than white or Blacks, despite poverty and discrimination. Now, he's not saying that Hispanic Americans are better, he's just saying they live longer. And so that is a claim he's making. Does he have any evidence right here?
No.
Yeah, none right here. And I think that that's important. Thank you, Alejandro. If he wants us to believe this, he's going to have to provide some more evidence. And so down here, he expands on this statement. He says, also, they appear to have lower suicide rates than whites, are less likely to drink alcohol than whites, they're less likely to die from drug overdoses, and at least among immigrants appear to commit fewer crimes. And that's a lot of details. And he's comparing not to other minority groups, but whites. Why do you think he's focused on that comparison of Latinx people, Hispanic people, to white people? Why does he narrow that comparison?
Is it like because like white people are expected to commit the least crimes and stuff like that?
Yeah, a lot of particularly white people think that that is the case. They have stereotypes of minorities, and so they're judging them. And so a rhetorical strategy that Kristof is using right here is to compare and contrast. Compare Latinx people to white people. And he names some things that we might think might be bad, you know, like suicide, excessive alcohol, drug overdose deaths, and crimes. And we find that Latinos, if we compare and contrast, they seem like more ideal citizens. Does he have any evidence here?
Are they just claims?
They are claims. Do you see those blue lines? Thank you, Alejandro. Do you see those blue lines on the page? These are hyperlinks. And if I click on them, do you see this page from the NIH?
Yeah.
Okay, so now every one of those links takes us to evidence. And this is from the National Institute of Health, which we generally think of as very credible. This is a publication based on science and statistics and data. And so we have all kinds of surveys and details, narrowing it down. And that's all what he's doing. So every single time I'm back on here. So here would be a link to evidence, and here's a link to evidence that immigrants commit fewer crimes. And here was my note that I wrote is these go against stereotypes that politicians have, and that he uses hyperlinks to take his readers to data supporting his claims. Why doesn't he provide all of that very detailed evidence right here? Why do you think he doesn't add that? Ezekiel?
For me personally, as a reader, I would say that for him to provide all the detail is one thing, but providing the links to do the research ourselves is another thing. We can prove to ourselves that what he's saying is true.
Yes, and this is a very short article, which is important to recognize that it's intended to be short. And so if he provides all those details, his readers might stop reading. And he wants them to read to the end. And so he says, if you doubt me, here's the links, you can check it out yourself. But it keeps the readers going. So here's the claim, there's evidence, but I'm not going to give it to you now. So now he says researchers have puzzled for decades about why this is. Why say decades? Why emphasize that this has been true for a very long time?
Because the stereotypes are very old.
Yeah, the stereotypes are old, and this paradox is not new. This paradox has existed all the time that we've had stereotypes in this nation. And then he lists them. He identifies possible reasons for that paradox. And that's what I've done. I've been writing the claims, and I've been talking back to the text. I told you on my paper, I circled and numbered, and that's a little harder to do online, but this is useful. And to remember that claim that people live longer, here he adds the data. Hispanics in the United States endure discrimination, high poverty, lower rates of health insurance than both whites and blacks, that they enjoy a life expectancy of 81.8 years compared to 78.5 years for whites and 74.9 years for blacks. Wow, that's pretty significant. Now, he doesn't tell us where he has that data, but why is it important that he provide the numbers?
The numbers show it's more credible.
Yeah, and they show the big gap. And then he's got a hyperlink, and we have a 66-page report from the Center for Disease Control. The data is from 2017, the report's from 2019, so this is recent. And if we want, we can read the data ourselves. And so he's got that evidence there. And now he makes another claim. He says, this resiliency is now tested by the coronavirus, which has hit Latinos particularly hard. I didn't initially know this. And so I knew this before I read this Kristof article a few weeks ago, but I didn't know it until, well, probably about the same time Kristof was reporting this. And so he has the data. Some people might think, oh no, it hits everybody just as hard. It's equal across the board. But that's not entirely true. How many of you know somebody in your community with, I'm gonna stop share, and just how many of you know somebody in your community that has COVID, has had COVID? You can use the signal to raise your hand. The South Bay has lots of people. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that that's important to note, is like, you might know it from experience, you might know it from observation, but I live in a largely white community, and I have a job that allows me to work from home. I'm not out in the community, so I'm very privileged in being able to work from home. And but that's not true of all my students. A lot of them are working in restaurants or working in grocery stores, are delivery people. Last spring, I had several students that got very sick and from Southwestern College, and they had to drop out of school. And so, like, not every community experiences the same thing. And so he adds that detail. And he has those statistics. And now he enters in. He says, I came to Cornelius, a town west of Portland, with a large Latino population to gauge the impact of the crisis. And the virus predictably has struck Hispanics hard. And so he's got the statistics from the CDC, and now he adds an example. And he describes the Hispanics in this town, Cornelius. Many are undocumented immigrants and are not receiving federal relief payments. Yet what struck me, in keeping with the Hispanic paradox, was how the community pulled together to ease their suffering. So do you remember he named 4 things that make Hispanics resilient, that lead to a longer life expectancy? Strong families, supportive social networks, religious faith, and work ethic. And now he's going to provide examples and authorities who say that. Notice how he says they aren't receiving federal relief payments. Why add that detail? It's an important detail.
Because it shows that even though they're struggling more, they're not getting the relief that everyone else is.
Yes. Why else add that?
Because it shows how they're like resilient and like in what ways they are.
Definitely. It also refutes a common belief that immigrants are here to take government money. That's not true. It's easier to stay in our own countries. And so when people immigrate to the United States, they have a reason for coming here, and it's not to take government money. In fact, they're not taking government money. And so Kristof is emphasizing that idea because he wants to refute or speak against the stereotypes. And it's important that he not do that straight out, because if he does it, if he just does it explicitly, somebody might say, well, that's not true. And so he's giving examples, and those examples illustrate this implicit claim. So this is what I wrote in my notes. They're undocumented, so they aren't getting federal money, but they are working together as a community to care for each other. And it's very important to him that he claims that they are not getting federal money, because he knows that some of his readers think that undocumented immigrants get all kinds of free stuff. And that is not true. It's a myth. it's a stereotype, and he wants to make sure that he refutes it. And then he provides the example of Frances, and he describes her. She's undocumented, but she had a job, and she's living with family, so he's emphasizing the family ties. And not only is her family caring for her, she's caring for other people. She works for a church. And so she says, my car overheats, but I make it work. So what is he showing about undocumented immigrants with this example of Frances? What claims is he making about undocumented immigrants?
Their resilience.
They're resilient. They don't let a problem get them down. What else is he claiming about undocumented immigrants? Ezekiel?
That they're not bad people who are breaking the law. They're people who love their, love their community and do a lot of things. Frances was talking about how she's sacrificing herself to be in an overheating car just to provide relief to needy families. So it shows a self-sacrifice right there in Latin communities.
Thank you. That's really good. And that's analysis, is we have these details and we want to think, why are those details there? What are those details doing? What are they showing to readers? He could say undocumented immigrants are good people, but instead of saying that, he shows that they're good people. Here's Frances. She's a very good person. She's doing a lot of things to help other people, even though she's in a bad place herself. And that's really important. And so right here, he's gonna show some more, and he adds some evidence that since the start of the pandemic, let me move this note over to the side. Since the pandemic, 1 in 6 households in the US has young children who aren't getting enough food. And here's a bad detail. The Brookings Institute, he doesn't provide a hyperlink, but he's naming where he gets that evidence. And so we asked Frances about hunger, and she says, there might be hungry children, there must be, but if people knew kids were hungry, they would help. The community would step up. And once again, he provides an example to illustrate his claim that Hispanic communities are close-knit, that they care for each other. Now, Frances is just one example. And his readers might think, oh, that's really nice. Frances is a very nice immigrant, but not everybody is. And so he is going to provide a second example. On the other end of the United States, in New York City, which is where this newspaper is from, a doctor, and he gives her name. She's an epidemiologist. She studies Latinx populations, and she says she has seen signs on Spanish-speaking churches offering food for the needy. So it's not just in Oregon, but it's in New York City too, that Spanish-speaking people, Latinx immigrant communities, care for each other in Oregon, in New York. And if we don't slow down and see what is the author doing, why is the author doing it, we might miss these details about immigrants, refuting stereotypes, the value of what Kristof is doing. Because remember, we have a large, we have a lot of anti-immigrant movements in the United States. and people are concerned about immigration. And he wants to say, we don't need to be concerned about immigration. Immigrants are good. Hispanic immigrants are great. We could actually learn a few things from them. And he has other examples. Here's a rhetorical strategy. Before, he compared life expectancies in Hispanic communities with Black and white communities. He compared suicide rates, alcohol rates in white communities versus Hispanic communities. And now he wants to compare the kids in his town when they experienced poverty. 25% of the kids in his old school are dead from drugs, alcohol, suicide, and other deaths of despair, but that isn't true in Hispanic communities. And then he quotes Trump. Provides another example of Adelante Mujeres, and then another example of an authority, and some more evidence from a Harvard study. And finally, he says, the social fabric isn't a perfect shield from a pandemic, but it helps, and perhaps there's a lesson in that for all of us. We need to learn. Okay. Is there anything in there that we talked about that you maybe didn't think about when you were reading before? Okay, Ezekiel.
One thing that we discussed was that the links that he provided, so you can do your own evidence. I never really paid attention to that, but also to pay attention to certain details and how every little detail can be one certain claim that he's making throughout his text. So I know I need to work on slowing down more, making sure I get all those details and see what he's claiming in that way.
Yeah, it's that slowing down. We might not catch that he's making an argument about immigration, and because that was very implicit. And I don't know if it's his overall argument, but it's definitely related to his purpose. He wants us to see that his purpose is for us to re-examine stereotypes that we have and be less suspicious of Hispanic immigrants or undocumented immigrants. I want to introduce some words to you that are important when we're analyzing a text, things that we want to look for. You'll notice that this spells PACES. It's an acronym. P stands for project purpose, A stands for argument, C stands for claims, E stands for evidence, S stands for rhetorical strategies. Let's pause and let's talk about project and purpose. Now the project, let me move my face. The project is the work that an author is doing in a text. And we want to describe what an author's doing. We're going to use a verb to do that, a strong verb that describes what the author is doing and not what the author is saying. So we don't want to use verbs like says or talks about or in claims or informs. We might use a verb like describes or discusses or identifies. Those are important verbs that you could use. So it's the work that an author is doing in a text. And purpose is what the author wants to achieve with this text. Because there's always some kind of response. So with Koenig, he wants his readers to defend the rights of the Native Americans, to stand with the Native Americans protesting at Standing Rock. With E. Shelley Reed, her purpose was to kind of take away some of the fear of writing by giving strategies. And Kristof has a purpose too. He wants to achieve something. And I think that has a lot to do with his emphasis on immigration. So again, use a strong verb. Do not say says, informs, claims, talks about, so they know. It's not about knowing, it's about a gut response. So he might remind readers that something, challenge readers to, so readers will acknowledge, encourage readers to do something. I mean, we want to think about that. And so if we were going to write about project and purpose, we would say Kristof does what, this is the project, in order to achieve what purpose. So I'm going to divide you into, I'm sending you a link. This will prompt you to copy the PowerPoint, and I'm going to give you, I don't know, 3 minutes to think about the text. And by the way, there's a link to the text in here. And so you'll be able to do that. I want you to fill in that sentence. So you'll have about 3 minutes to do that, okay? I think I'm gonna put 3 of you into a group, 2 to 3 in each group, okay? Now go, just that one sentence. I know there are more slides. Audrey, be sure to accept the invitation to move into the breakout room. Okay, let's, so what are some things that you all came up with? Kristof does what in order to achieve what purpose? Group 5, how did you fill in those blanks?
I'd say Kristof does a lot of showing and not telling in order to like really get his point across.
Okay, so that's a nice start. Let's think more specifically, because if we want to explain what his project is, we want to say what he shows. So how could you expand that, Esteban? Kristof shows.
He shows us what these Hispanic communities can do
So
when they get together.
he shows how Hispanic communities work together in order to, how does he want his audience to respond? What does he want
And
to
to
achieve?
show like their positive image and their like resilience.
Okay, so in order to refute the stereotypes and reveal the positivity and
Yeah, to show
resilience.
the people they really are.
Yeah, in order to show what Hispanic people are really like instead of what they think. Good, good. How about group 2? What did you come up with?
We wrote that Kristof provides evidence in his article, such as providing links and like talking about other Hispanic stories in order to break down the stereotypes and to show the importance of the Hispanic community to his audience.
Good, good job. Group 1, what did you write?
I was focused I was kind of focused more on how he used the hyperlinks in order to kind of tell people that they're not living up to their own stereotypes, that they're um, like mm, like they're kind of I don't know, just that they're different. Like they're not how people how other people like think of them. Like they don't fit the normal stereotypes.
So, Gabriel, to rephrase that, just Kristof provides hyperlinks and evidence in order to show that Hispanics aren't the way people normally think about them. Kind of like that?
Yes, yes.
Nice. Last one, group 7. Group 7, are you there?
We said Kristof addresses and debunks the prejudiced ideas in the society in order to make his audience understand that Hispanic communities have so much to offer.
Very nice. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, it's important to think about what an author is trying to accomplish and what they're doing in the text in order to accomplish that. And this is more than just this. When you can write a summary like that, that focus on what an author does, instead of just what an author is saying, you can kind of get to the main ideas. I want to move on to, this is what I wrote. Kristof examines what makes Hispanic Americans so resilient in order to challenge the country to reconsider how they view Hispanics, both documented and undocumented. And I want to point out that what I wrote isn't a lot different than what you wrote. I just used my words and phrasing to say it, but we used the same template in order to communicate the same idea in different words. And that's what writing is that, you know, like if we're reading closely, we'll all come up with pretty much the same information, but it will always be ours because we have different ways of saying things. And I think that that's important to remember. Now, his argument is a little different than, you know, like what he's doing or what he's, his purpose is. And this is a really good template. You notice I put in bold a lot of things so they would stand out, because you could fill these in. So here I'm introducing the text and his main point. In his editorial titled "Now is a Time to Learn from Hispanic Americans," published in the New York Times, columnist and human rights activist Nicholas Kristof examines why Latinx Americans generally live longer than white or Black Americans and argues that other Americans could learn from Hispanic culture with its emphasis on family, community, and faith. And I think that is, you notice I'm revising even as I read aloud. This is, you know, like his topic is the Hispanic paradox, which is that Latinx Americans live longer. And the argument is Americans could learn from them. So we have our project, what he's doing. We have his purpose, which is what he wants to accomplish. He wants to refute all those stereotypes. And his argument is Americans could learn this, okay? Claims are subpoints that help support the main claim. The main claim is the argument, and the subclaim is, it helps support the main claim. And I wrote a couple of those there. Undocumented immigrants are church-going people. Undocumented immigrants do not take handouts from the government. And I'm going to put you back in your groups, and I want you to find as many claims as you can. Use the same slides, and I want you to find evidence for those claims. In fact, every time you name a claim, find the evidence for that. It might be an example that he uses. For example, Frances is a church-going person. She also does not take handouts. So see what else you can find. Find the evidence. It might be statistics, it might be authorities, it might be personal experience. Find as many claims as you can in your groups, okay? And this will be on your slide, okay? Breakout rooms, same ones. About 4 minutes this time.
Well, I'm not assigned to.
Yeah, let me put you in, Esteban, let me put you in breakout room 5. Oops. And Esteban. And Kevin, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm going to put you in grade 5 also.
Okay.
Hi. Okay, so did you get the invitation? Alexa, set timer for 3.5 minutes. You discovered as you were reading this. Group 6, what are some claims that you discovered?
Well, he says that that Hispanic Americans do drugs less or die from overdoses less and suicide less and drinking less.
And did he have evidence, Taylor?
Yes, ma'am, with the hyperlinks.
Yeah. Group 7, what's another claim that he made? Group 7?
He argued that like the communities were like, the big thing was that the communities were always like pulling together to help each other.
Good, good. Group 2, what is another claim that Kristof makes?
Oh, we said that Hispanics in the United States endure discrimination, high poverty, lower rates of health insurance than both whites and blacks. And he provides like a hyperlink after that. And also Latino families in the area have seen more resilient because of their greater social capital and stuff.
I also wanted to go along with what Mariah said. He also, when he's talking about the lower rates of alcohol abuse and drug abuse, he gives the example that it's because of their strong religious beliefs that they are not doing these things. So for every claim that Kristof is making, he has evidence to back it up, whether it's an experience or statistics. He shows that.
Yes. So in this very short article, I think this is the shortest one we've read this semester. He has more evidence than anybody else, and it's boom, 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 which is the style of an editorial, which is an opinion piece. So let's pause here because it's 9 o'clock right now. And I want to let you know what we're doing next. You've got your homework on this article, and on Saturday, on the week 5 wrap-up page, there is a prompt for the essay that you're going to write, because next week we don't have a brand new reading. We have They Say, I Say, but we don't have a brand new reading. What we have is an essay that you're going to start working on. And it's going to ask you to summarize part of one of the texts we have read, Linfor or Koenig or Kristof, and then you're going to join the conversation. You're going to say, here's what they say, and here's their claim, and here's how I respond. But it's going to be a full essay where you're going to develop it with an introduction and quotes from the text and your own stories. And so on Monday morning, I will meet here and I will talk about the prompt and how to approach it. I'll also have a short video that will be on Canvas, and so you can meet with me on Monday to talk about the prompt, or you can watch the video that's on Canvas, either one. The difference with if you show up on Monday at 8 o'clock, you can ask questions, which is harder to do on a video because I don't generally talk back. So you're released to go, and I'll stick around and answer any questions you have about what we discussed or things you'd like to add to the discussion. And otherwise, have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
I had a quick question regarding the assignment that's due tonight.
Yeah.
You said that we didn't have to answer all the questions, but should we do at least more than, because I remember you said 350 words and up. So, you know what, never mind. I'll figure it out on my own. Thank you.
I can answer that question really quickly, Ezekiel.
Okay.
I want you to write at least 350 words. A reading journal is not an essay that has a beginning,
Okay.
middle, and an end necessarily.
All right.
And so I want you to explore the ideas deeply instead of just trying to answer every single question. But
Okay.
sometimes a student might not have an answer to one question, but they would have an answer to another, and they'd rather write about that.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
sure, you too.
Oh, Miss Ryan, my question was, will we start the essay this week or next week?
We'll start it next week. The prompt is on Canvas, so you can read it in advance, but don't start writing it. But you can think about ideas, things that you might want to write about. They might be things that you've already touched on in the discussion board or in the reading journals.
Okay, I was just asking if there's like something I could do to get ahead, because I'm gonna be a little busy next week. There's a lot of things going on. So I was wondering if I could like not start the essay, but if there's like brainstorming ideas so that when I do start the essay, I can just crank it out.
Yeah, definitely. And the only thing that's due next week is the introduction.
Oh, okay. So how long is this gonna be?
The essay is going to be about 3 pages.
Oh, okay, so not too bad.
No, not too bad.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Alejandro.
All right, goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna. Can you hear me? Hello.
I can hear you, Gabriel.
Okay. I was just gonna ask you something regarding the thing you wrote on one of my assignments. It was like how you wouldn't be accepting any late work after this week. I was just wondering what assignments would I be able to turn in still?
Gabriel, I'm not accepting